Hi there, my name is Gabriel Morris. I am a author and a world traveler. I've been traveling around the world off and on since I was 18 years old. I'm 41. I actually started hitchhiking when I was about 8 years old. I lived in Northern California in the woods outside of a small town up a dirt road, and I started hitchhiking the last little bit home after getting dropped off by the bus, because the bus would drop me off at the bottom of this dirt road, and then it was another 1.5 miles up this road to my house. So that was when my hitchhiking adventures began, and then once I turned 18, I traveled to Europe and hitchhiked the entire length of the United Kingdom, and then around some other parts of Europe, and then had a train pass for the rest of Europe. And then I've been traveling off and on around the world since then, so 20 something years now. I've been to 21 countries so far, so I have quite a few left to go to. I'm here working in Jasper National Park, Alberta, Canada, in the Rocky Mountains at the moment, but I'm going to be taking off for future travels in just another couple of months, so very much looking forward to seeing some new parts of the world. So I mentioned that I'm an author of several books, including Following My Thumb, A Decade of Unabashed Wanderlust, which chronicles my travels from 1990 to 2000. So it starts off with that first trip to Europe, and then culminates with my first journey to India in 1999 and 2000, when I spent 5 months traveling around India. The first chapter, actually the foreword of the book, details the experience when I was a kid of hitchhiking up that little dirt road. And so I thought that I would go down some of the chapter titles here and just give a quick little sort of take on what some of the chapters are about. And then I'm going to read a couple of pages, just a short little excerpt from one of the chapters in which I work in Denali National Park, Alaska, in the summer of 1992, which is the same summer that Chris McCandless hitchhiked to Alaska, hiked out to that bus, through the snow across a frozen river, and then ended up stranded at this bus and then died of starvation out there, as chronicled in the book and the movie Into the Wild. I was working in Denali Park, just like 30 miles or so away from him. And then I learned about that after that season was over. I learned that some guy had, been found dead somewhere on the outer edges of the park, and then later read the article in Outside Magazine, which was the first, look that people had on this story of Chris McCandless. And so I share some of my thoughts on his story and his experience and lack of experience in ending up in that kind of a situation. So I'll get to that in just a minute. So there's 5 different parts to the book. The first one starts off with my trip to Europe when I was 18 in the summer of 1990. One of the chapter titles is Loch Ness and Other Mysteries, and that talks about my experience of hitchhiking in northern Scotland, getting picked up by a businessman who takes me back to his wife at his house, and they cook me dinner, and then we drive to Loch Ness together and hike along the lake. Sleep under the bridge, not on it. This details my sleeping on the Pont Neuf, which is the oldest bridge, or it's called the new. Pont Neuf means new bridge, but it's the oldest bridge in Paris, France. I slept on that bridge and got my backpack stolen in the process. The Idiot's Guide to Denali, and this is when I was working in Denali National Park, summer of 1992, and go on a backpacking trip with several friends, and we have just a ridiculous experience of like everything going wrong that possibly could. Always double check the directions. This details my going to Sedona, Arizona with a couple of hippie guys in their van who were looking for a healing fair that they were going to do some of their special healing work to make a little money. We started in Northern California, got a ride with these guys, drove all the way to Sedona, Arizona, and then they discovered that the flyer actually said Sonoma, California. And so we'd been like a couple hours away from there when we left California, driven all the way across California and Arizona to Sedona to end up in the wrong place. For them at least. I was going there for a different reason. When dealing with the authorities, try to keep your clothes on. This is when I was living in the rainforest of Hawaii, and I was sunbathing nude on the beach, and a bunch of forest rangers showed up, checking tickets and everything at the state park that I was in, where I was camping, and I didn't have a proper ticket, and ended up having to like run away from these guys and hide in the bushes for like a couple of days, because they stay in that area for a certain period of time, scouring all over the place. And so I was kind of like playing, cat and mouse with these guys for a couple of days. And a fucking adventure, which is from my trip to India, and it's 1999, New Year's Eve, and I go with these two Israeli guys that I'd met in the course of my travels into the jungle in India, in South India, kind of near the Arabian Sea, and end up camping out in the jungle, in which some locals end up coming to our campsite and warning us that there's tigers in this jungle and that this isn't a safe place to camp. So I'll just leave it there without telling the full story. So lastly, I will go ahead and read a little bit from the Idiot's Guide to Denali about my thoughts on Chris McCandless. It was a month or so later, as I was packing up and preparing to leave Denali Park in Alaska to move back to Northern California, that I heard something about a young man found dead near the north edge of the park. A few months later, back in California, I came across an article in Outside Magazine about Chris McCandless and how he'd starved to death throughout the summer that I was in Denali, just 30 miles away from where I was living and working. His story touched me pretty deep, especially after reading the book Into the Wild a few years later, which better explained his fascinating tale of rejecting society and hitting the road, and the harrowing circumstances that led up to his puzzling disappearance and tragic demise. It turned out that, at the same time he was hitchhiking up the Alcan Highway through Canada to Alaska, I was just getting ready to unwittingly follow on his heels. I'd taken the ferry from where I was attending school in Juneau that year, through the countless islands of the Panhandle to Haines, and then hitched part of the same highway he had hitchhiked through Canada's Yukon Territory to interior Alaska, on my way to work that summer in Denali Park. Although I can't at all condone his behavior, how he left his parents hanging, not knowing his whereabouts for almost 2 years, as he hitchhiked around the country, hoping to find himself, I presume, or perhaps just running away, I could still somewhat relate to the nature of his quest. He was, it seemed, like myself, on a search for something real, something wild and pure, both within and without, and he had found it, no doubt about that. Unfortunately, he had starved to death as a result of both his recklessness, he seemed clearly unprepared, as well as unforeseen circumstances beyond his control, such as the frozen river he'd unknowingly crossed, now flowing when he tried to return months later. But in the process, it was apparent, by his account, that he had touched something raw and real, perhaps even illuminating within himself. In the remaining few weeks before his lonely death in the wilderness, he had expressed in his journal deep feelings of bliss and contentment. Perhaps he had just gone nuts, or maybe he had somehow managed to find that unconditional peace and acceptance that many of us seek, but which can be so hard to grasp in our complex modern world. Sometimes finding oneself means going well beyond the comfort zone, deep into unknown territory. It can be hard to distinguish the rational boundary lines at that point. Chris McCandless clearly went beyond that line, but I feel that his intentions, at least, deserve some merit, if not his common sense. As one who can imagine to some degree where his head was at, I think that what he was trying to do was simply acknowledge and somehow face the unknown darkness within and see what it contained, rather than hide from that which we fear and pretend it's not there. Jump headlong into it, get a feel for what exists out beyond the familiar paved roads in that unsettling foreign land where the moose, grizzly, and eagle roam free. There's another very real and deeply meaningful world out beyond the realm of human perception, which we can glimpse and perhaps even get acquainted with if we so desire. For the unknown is truly unknown only as long as we choose to ignore it. There's really only one way to get to know anything, and that's to experience it. Ultimately, life is an adventure, whether we like it or not. Better for the soul to accept this, it seems, and then live accordingly. So that's just a few pages from The Idiot's Guide to Denali in Following My Thumb, A Decade of Unabashed Wanderlust. I'll go ahead and put a link down below this video here to the book, available on Amazon.com as both a paperback and an ebook. Feel free to check out the Amazon page and read some of the reviews there. Thanks for watching. Take care.